A push for peace. Regional powers meet in Islamabad and say they're committed to paving a path to de-escalation. Benjamin Netanyahu says he's ordered troops to seize more territory in southern Lebanon. Over 1 million people have already been forced from their homes. Iran has warned the US against a potential ground invasion as the joint American and Israeli offensive shows no sign of slowing down. And it came as key regional powers met in Pakistan, and that's to push for a diplomatic solution to the conflict. Islamabad says it's prepared to host meaningful talks between the US and Iran in the coming days, but it's unclear what form they might take. There's been no commitment from either side. Now, after Iran's power infrastructure was hit by multiple strikes on Sunday, its forces targeted an industrial zone in southern Israel. The attack started a fire at a chemical plant, raising concerns about a leak of hazardous material. And from Tehran, accusations from the Speaker of Parliament that the US is preparing a ground offensive. That's despite President Trump's talk of negotiations. Now, posting on X, Mohammad Baghir Ghalibaf said the enemy openly sends messages of negotiation and dialogue while secretly plotting a ground attack, unaware that our men are waiting for the American soldiers to enter on the ground so that they can rain fire upon them and punish their regional partners. He also says we're aware of the enemy's weaknesses and clearly see the signs of fear and terror in the enemy's army. Right, well, we're live in Washington, D.C., Amman in Jordan, Beirut in Lebanon, and also Tehran. That's where Mohammed Val is live for us in the Iranian capital. Now, Mohammed, this warning from Tehran regarding U.S. boots on the ground, what are the Iranians saying about this exactly?
Well, the Iranians are saying that this is their approach to this war. It's retaliation and escalation versus escalation, but also they are saying in particular regarding the prospects of ground invasion, that this is the very thing that they would welcome and they would be happy to see taking place. Because if Israel and the United States have air superiority, the Iranians think that they will have ground superiority once the American troops are here in a kind of ground invasion, because they have the numbers it takes. Hundreds of thousands of troops and paramilitary are ready and equipped, and also they know the geography and they think they will be able to inflict extensive damage and loss of lives on the other side, and that's something they count on to create a pressure in the United States against the U.S. president, because this war hasn't yet been authorized by the Congress, and the Americans can't tolerate, according to the Iranian understanding, they can't tolerate the extensive loss of life among their soldiers. So the Iranians think that this is going to give them more leverage and more upper hand in this war, even more than what they are doing now with their missiles and drones across the region.
And we are hearing that a petrochemical plant has been targeted in Tabriz. It seems one of many targets in the last 24 hours.
That's right. That's in Tabriz in the northwest. That petrochemical plant has been hit, and eyewitnesses saw a tremendous amount of smoke rising from it, and also the authorities talking about efforts being deployed to contain the situation. There are reassurances that no toxic leakage has taken place so far, but it's a very concerning development to the Iranians, because I think it is vital infrastructure again being hit, related to power, related to the livelihood of people, and they have a very strong stance towards that, and they say they have what it takes to punish the enemy and to retaliate in kind. Let me read to you a few lines from Majid Musawi, head of the IRGC Aerospace Division. Revenge of the attack on Iran's infrastructure with the destruction of strategic industries related to the American Zionist weapons in the region is being done. Until now, Neot chemical industries in the occupied territories, a refinery, 2 steel complexes, 2 aluminium super complexes, and these painful attacks continue, so that we can see the pain in your eyes. So that's the policy here in Iran. They say they have the necessary weapons to and the technology to be able to pinpoint places in the region, and particularly in Israel, in order to exact the same amount of pain and the same amount of destruction on similar facilities if any of Iran's infrastructure, vital facilities, are hit.
All right, thanks very much. Mohammed Val, that's the update there from the attacks that have been carried out on Iran. And let's now go to Washington, D.C. That's where Teresa Bow is live for us. Now, Teresa, Iran has warned that it is anticipating or waiting for American boots on the ground. But what's the administration been saying about a troop deployment?
Well, thousands of troops are heading to the Middle East. We can confirm that what is known as the USS Tripoli, an amphibious vessel, has already arrived to the region, carrying over 3,000 sailors and Marines. We also know that the Marines Expeditionary Unit from California is also being deployed with the 2,000 Marine. And then the 82nd Airborne Division, which is a rapid response unit that has the capacity to be deployed in a period of 24 hours, that carries special forces, among other things, could be deployed in the next few days. That's the information we're mostly getting from CENTCOM. But also the Washington Post is reporting today, and this is interesting, is that the Pentagon is getting ready for a ground invasion. And what this report suggests is that this would include special forces on the ground, also the regular army, that could be targeting what is known as Harg Island, which Donald Trump has referred to as the jewel of the crown. And so certainly this brings about the impact that something like this would have in the United States, and how unpopular putting boots on the ground in Iran would be. It reminds people here about what happened in Afghanistan, what happened in Iraq. Many say that this would be, again, the endless war. So certainly there's lots of different opinions of what would it mean here for the United States to put boots on the ground, but it's highly unpopular. And while some Republicans are saying that this is necessary, that there needs to be regime change in Iran and continue to push, there's also lots of other people here in the United States, including Democratic senators, who are extremely concerned about what something like this would bring about.
And in terms of negotiations, Teresa, Pakistan says that it wants to host US-Iran talks. Is there any sense of sort of willingness to engage in diplomacy from the White House at this stage in the war?
Well, that's what it seems. I mean, we've been seeing Donald Trump's comments saying that Iran is desperate for a deal, that there are talks underway and that they are going well. And we also have not been able to confirm independently whether this type of meetings or any type of negotiations would be happening anytime soon. The White House so far has not confirmed that meetings could take place. However, let's not forget what's been happening in this past week, from Donald Trump saying that it was not ready for a ceasefire, then going to say that he was ready for unwinding the situation, then giving Tehran 48 hours to open the Strait of Hormuz, and now extending that deadline until April 6th at 8 o'clock in the evening Eastern time. If not, if Iran does not open the Strait of Hormuz, it would blow up the country's power plant. So we've been seeing all these mixed messages, but certainly there's this talks ongoing. And also the United States and Donald Trump has said that the main priority for them right now is destroying Iran's ballistic missiles, destroying Iran's industrial base, protecting Middle Eastern allies in the region. So we've been seeing different approaches to what the United States wants to get out of this. And we've been seeing lots of changes since this war started. It started with hoping for regime change, Trump telling people to go to the streets to take back their government. Now it's opening the Strait of Hormuz. So, of course, there's lots of questions about how interested the United States really is in engaging in peace talks with Iran.
All right, thank you very much for that update. That's Teresa Bow, live for us in Washington, D.C. Well, Israel's military says it's anticipated 2 drones launched from Yemen. That's over the southern port city of Eilat. And it comes a day after Yemen's Houthis entered the Middle East conflict with their first attacks on Israel. Let's go live now to Rob McBride. He's following those developments in Israel from the Jordanian capital, Amman. So, Rob, what more do we know about the attack? Because Eilat, of course, is a strategic location because of its port.
Yeah, that's right. This seems to be more missile and drone activity that has been going on throughout Sunday and now into the early hours of Monday morning. But this, again, according to Israel's Air Force, seems to be incursions from Yemen. Ever since the Houthis announced that they were entering this conflict, it has opened up this third front for Israel. Its air defences now have to keep an eye on what comes into its airspace from the south, not just from Hezbollah in the north and from Iranian missile sites in Iran to the east. So they detected these drones earlier in the very early hours of Monday morning, just a couple of hours ago. They said they were intercepted, but this does follow other incursions that happened when the Houthis announced they were joining this conflict. And there has been a busy day, mainly directed at the south. By the end of Sunday, the authorities say that they intercepted and had to deal with around a dozen different missiles, ballistic missiles coming from Iran. One of those, of course, causing damage in Beersheba, which is further north than Eilat in the Negev desert. That, of course, caused shrapnel to cause this explosion and fire at this chemical works. Now, that is of concern because there was a danger that toxic chemicals were going to spill out. It was going to cause a hazard to people nearby. An alert was raised. People were told to stay indoors, keep their doors shut. But then within a few hours, the Environmental Protection Ministry had declared that the area was safe. But it is a concern because of the tit-for-tat against between Iran's infrastructure and attacks on Israel's infrastructure does seem to be escalating, including more and more different targets. Now we seem to be getting into industrial type targets. This, according to Iran, was a direct response to attacks on its industrial complexes.
Thank you for that update. Rog McBride there in Amman, Jordan. And of course, that attack he's referring to on a chemical plant in southern Israel is raising fears that hazardous materials could be released into the atmosphere, forcing the evacuation of residents. Noor Alda reports.
These thick plumes of smoke caused panic in southern Israel. An Iranian missile hit a chemical factory in the Niyot Hovav industrial zone near Beersheba, sparking fears of a leak of hazardous material. As firefighters battled the raging fire, residents were told to seal their windows and shelter indoors. The main highway to Beersheba was closed. The Niyot Hovav industrial zone has 19 chemical and pharmaceutical factories. It's also home to Israel's main hazardous waste disposal facility. Iran's Revolutionary Guard has said it will retaliate to Israel's strikes of Iranian factories and strategic assets by targeting Israeli locations of equivalent value. A threat that may explain why Beersheba, Dimona, and the Negev at large have been the focus of many Iranian strikes. Hours after the chemical plant strike, Israeli environmental authorities declare there is no leak of hazardous material. Threat averted for now. But the missiles keep coming, striking several locations in Beersheba again and injuring 13. With Israel vowing to decimate Iran's industrial capabilities, many fear dangerous incidents like this are likely to repeat. Noor Alda, Al Jazeera.
Israel's parliament has passed this year's budget after an emergency warning of Iranian missiles interrupted the debate. The alert sounded on phones across the chamber. Israeli government and opposition figures were forced to take shelter in an underground bunker during the strikes. The United Nations peacekeeping mission in Lebanon, known as UNIFIL, says one of its peacekeepers has been killed in southern Lebanon. Another was critically injured when a projectile exploded near a position of theirs in Qusayr. They've said they do not know the origin of the projectile and an investigation is now underway. Let's go live to the Lebanese capital, Beirut. Heidi Pett is live for us there. Heidi, of course, this isn't the first time that someone from UNIFIL, a peacekeeper, has been a target in this war, but it is the first death since this conflict started. What more can you tell us?
Yes, you're absolutely right. This isn't the first time that UNIFIL has come under fire in the last 4 weeks, and certainly not the first time that UNIFIL has come under fire down in southern Lebanon in previous wars between Israel and Hezbollah. But the notable incidents in the last couple of weeks was back on the 6th of March when Israel fired 3 tank shells at a UNIFIL base. Very similar location, in fact, to the place where they've been targeted tonight in Adshat el-Qusayr. And in that incident on the 6th of March, 3 Ghanaian peacekeepers were injured. Now, Israel says that those tank shells were fired into that base by mistake. They came under fire by Hezbollah, and essentially they say that their troops got confused and targeted the UN peacekeepers in that incident. There's also been projectiles that have landed inside the UNIFIL base in the Ura down by the coast. Now, UNIFIL has ascribed that particular projectile to a non-state actor, i.e. Hezbollah. But, you know, in the statement earlier this evening where they've noted the death of one of these peacekeepers and the critical injury to another, they've said that nobody should lose their life in service of peace. And they've also noted that deliberate attacks on peacekeepers are grave violations of international law and may amount to war crimes. So as they've said, they are investigating the origin of this projectile and the circumstances under which it is fired, and we'll wait for more information on that when it comes through.
Of course. Now stay with me, Heidi, because the Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu has ordered the military to expand its invasion into southern Lebanon. He said the decision is aimed at strengthening security along the border following attacks by Hezbollah. Take a listen.
And in Lebanon, I have now instructed the military to further expand the existing security belt in order to finally thwart the threat of invasion and to keep the anti-tank missile fire away from our border. We eliminated thousands of Hezbollah terrorists, and above all, we eliminated the enormous threat of 150,000 missiles and rockets, which were intended to destroy Israeli cities. But Hezbollah still has a residual ability to launch rockets at us, and what I discussed today with the commanders here is ways to eliminate this threat as well.
All right, there. So an expansion there, as Netanyahu's saying, and it's obviously having an impact on people from southern Lebanon, this Israeli invasion.
Yeah, absolutely. The ongoing Israeli ground invasion in southern Lebanon is displacing enormous numbers of people from the region. It's about 14% of Lebanon in terms of the land mass that is now under forced evacuation orders by the Israeli military. There are more than 1 million people who have been forced from their homes, to say nothing of the direct impact, in fact, on people who have been killed or injured in Israeli airstrikes. And the latest number that we have from the Lebanese Ministry of Health in their update they issued this afternoon, 1,238 people have so far been killed in 4 weeks of war, 124 of them children. And in fact, just over this last weekend, 49 people have been killed, 10 of them paramedics and 3 journalists. Now, a number of those paramedics and journalists were actually injured in double tap attacks. That is where the Israeli military fires one projectile. They then fire another and possibly even several more. And that is the circumstances under which a number of paramedics and first responders have been killed in southern Lebanon in the last couple of days while they were attempting to rescue or assist people who had been targeted by initial attacks or airstrikes. So the impact on the civilian population is enormous. Not just in those direct deaths and injuries, but when Israel begins to target first responders, and they have reiterated their intention to do so just today, they've claimed without any evidence that ambulances are being used by Hezbollah to transport men and weapons, signaling their intention to target ambulances, in fact. And the impact that this has on civilians and on first responders is that when these attacks happen, it creates an atmosphere of fear. It means that people feel much less safe. It impacts on the ability of medical workers and humanitarians to respond to these attacks. And there is an ongoing effort by local councils, by humanitarian response, by aid agencies to get food and medicine and the supplies that people need to them in southern Lebanon. But these double tap attacks, and indeed the explosion, the destruction of infrastructure, of bridges across the Litani River, just makes that more difficult for the people who do remain in southern Lebanon. And there are still civilians in that region who have defied the forced evacuation orders.
All right, thank you very much. That's the update there from Lebanon. Heidi Platt.